What's the most interesting place you've worked? Because I'm looking at your background. It's like fascinating. But what do you consider, since you've been around a little bit, to be
Yeah,
interesting or unique?
every place that I worked at has been so different. I don't necessarily like to move offices, but when I've done, they've been for very, very specific reasons. Sometimes about money, sometimes about type of work, but they're all very different. And the experiences, I mean, different because of the type of work, the size, the location. The place that I've spent the most time in an office, it was an office which the partner split up. It was Rogers Marble Architects, and I was there from '99 to like I forget 2000.
I know the pandemic is hard. It's hard to go
I
back.
know. It's like, yeah, it's like the time. It's like,
No.
really? I've been working on this project for 5 years and it's not under construction yet. What the hell? I was there for like 12 years or something like that. And and I was fortunate enough to have been like the youngest person in the office when I got hired. And so I ended up doing a lot of kind of remedial work that nobody wanted to do. But I was right out of college, so I didn't know any better. And yeah, it's just where it's like, oh, you're gonna pay me? Oh, let's go. No. But it was. I mean, I knew that type of size was something that would be kind of beneficial. I had it. I mean, when you come out of college, you don't know anything. And some people say, oh, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. I was saying nobody knows anything. But I kind of knew that people seem nice and interesting and kind of committed to the practice of architecture, and it seemed like there was enough kind of meat on that bone to pick. And fortunately, as my kind of career moved ahead, so did the size and scope of the projects and the kind of the breadth of the work. I would say by far that was the most interesting one, just because every time there was a different challenge, or I was ready for a different challenge, there was something else in there for me to do. Whether nobody cared for what I was doing, or maybe they just had complete confidence in me and they just kind of gave me the longest leash in the world, I still don't know. One of these days I'll ask the principals of that office. I think it's probably a combination of both. They're like, we had so much work and not that many people to do it, and you were there and you did a good work, so yeah, sure. And I think the nice thing about that office, was that it kind of taught me the kind of the generalist approach to a practice. I don't know how uncommon or common it is nowadays, but clients are always kind of on the lookout for experts in a particular kind of subcategory or subfield.
Yeah.
And to be a generalist is to say, you know what, we know a little about a lot. So that kind of breadth of knowing will help us figure out what the solution for whatever the project is. It doesn't matter if it's retail or residential or workplace, whatever it is. But having done all of these projects and having been put on these different kind of experiences that you need to respond differently because they're all sorts of different problems. It's like, okay, well, this is another one of those. So that was super eye-opening and very interesting.
You're first out of school. It's like let's say your first 90 days in the new firm where you were.
Yeah.
Are you working on like 5 projects at a time, 12 projects at a time? What's the scale?
I was working on these public projects. It was a requirements contract with an agency, a New York City agency called DDC, which is the Department of Design and Construction. And they had just passed a law the year prior that every building over 5 stories needed to be inspected. The exterior envelope needed to be inspected every 5 years. Right. And then the office had a requirements contract with the city. And what that is that you aren't on a short list, and then projects that they have, they just publish to that short list as opposed to just kind of publishing it globally. So we had this requirements contract together with a structural engineering office to inspect all of these facades to see if they were in good condition or whatever. But I don't know what I'm looking at. It's like I just finished my thesis project about the simulacra of whatever the hell it was, And here I am on a drop scaffolding 5 stories high. Can I swear in this podcast? No.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. All right. I'm, shitting my pants because I'm in a scaffolding in the middle of a public school, facade in Brooklyn. And I have no clue how am I getting off of this scaffold. I don't know what I'm looking at. I mean, thank God the structural engineer did. But I was basically there to kind of sketch and document, take measurements, take dimensions, because at the end of the day, we were putting a report together, right? So thankfully, the structural engineer and the kind of the more senior person on the team actually knew what they were looking at. And I was just kind of there to kind of document the size of the beams and where the cracks were and the brick and all of that. So there were a handful of those. So we were doing, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12. But we got to see, I mean, it was a great experience to get to see some public buildings that not that many people get to see, especially up close, like big armories and just kind of some other buildings like that. Yeah, so that's how I got started.
That's fascinating. I mean, it's like I'm glad that we slowed down to get that in, because I love historic buildings, and I've hung out on scaffolding above sidewalks.
But also imagine, I'm on my first week. It's the middle of the summer in New York. I'm wearing all black because I'm an architect.
Of course.
And all of a sudden I have to take the train to Brooklyn, which, 25 years ago was not what it is now. And all of a sudden I have to go to the roof of this building and jump on that thing. I got pretty hot pretty quickly. There's
no prep for that. They're like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then after that, when that thing ended, I kind of hopped on some regular projects.
You earned your ability to draw from the comfort of a conditioned space.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just like, okay, well, somebody needs to do it. That guy's new. He's young.
Yeah. First job, went to work for a GC, and we were doing a high-rise like research building. And I went to school for electrical engineering. And I thought, oh, this is so cool. I'm going to get to look at like line diagrams and big equipment.
Yeah.
Now here's a computer, type in these daily reports, and
yeah, there you go. No, but it was interesting, and it was, it was a good learning experience.
Beautiful.
For sure. I was born in Puerto Rico and raised in Puerto Rico. Spanish is my first language. So I don't actually, when people ask, it's like, oh, is it Eugene? Is it Gene? Is it Eugene? I was like, guys, I have no clue. Call me whatever you want. In Puerto Rico, they say Eugene, but that's what people call me growing up. And it's just like, when people ask me, it's like, oh, do you go by Gene or Eugene or Eugene? And it's like, guys, just call me whatever you want.
But how do you say Colberg in Puerto Rican?
Colberg.
Colberg. I love it.
Yeah.
I lost the accent fast.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't have an accent anymore.
You definitely have an East Coast accent for sure.
Well, probably. Yeah. I mean, there's words that I get confused with here and there, and people look at me like, what? And at some point I'm like, guys, remember ESL over here. It's like, I can't,
ESL.
Yeah. No, I mean, I take spelling pretty seriously, but just pronunciating sometimes. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, there you go.
That's a unique one.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing though, is that now I work with a lot of people I actually have a bunch of consultants from Puerto Rico that are my age, other folks in the construction industry and stuff. And I realized that I learned architecture in English, right? Like I also speak French and Italian and there's some things that I learned, like Italian, for example, I learned in English.
Okay.
And French, I learned in Spanish. So even though French and Italian are super close, I have to go from like Italian to English, sometimes to Spanish, but over to French in order to, so it's like some things I know, like if you ask me to describe a building in Spanish, I'd like, just because I learned architecture in English, right? So I don't know the terms and I don't know but anyway,
I got a little pocket Spanish construction dictionary back there that words that I never would imagine.
Yeah.
That we never speak growing up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. Because that's not the language but anyway, one of these days we can have another podcast about that.
Yeah, we should.
Welcome to the EBFC Show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction.
Today's episode is sponsored by
BArch Refine My Site is a cloud-based construction collaboration platform that applies lean principles to enable your entire team to plan, communicate, and execute in real time. It's the digital tool that works in tandem with your last planner system process and puts it all together in one simple, collaborative ecosystem. This easy-to-use platform is available in English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and can be used on desktops, tablets, and mobile devices. According to Spencer Easton, scheduling manager at Oakland Construction,
Refine My Site, in my opinion, is the best, leanest tool on the market for last planner system.
here's what our users have to say. We've looked at 3 other digital scheduling platforms and none compare to the straightforward approach Refine My Site takes. From milestone planning all the way down to daily tasks, this program gives every general contractor and their trade partners meaningful collaboration, accountability, and KPIs. Register today to try Refine My Site for free for 60 days.
Today's show is also sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute.
LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Now, to the show.
Welcome to the show,
Yeah.
Eugene Colberg. Hey, Eugene.
Yeah. There you go.
Hey, Eugene. Yeah. I can think in both languages, Spanish and English, like interchangeably. But for this show, because I learned how to podcast in English, so totally.
There you go. Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, welcome to the show, Eugene Colberg. It's already been a treat. You're an amazing human being, Eugene. The first time we talked on the phone.
Yeah. I was walking down 3rd Avenue, trying to concentrate on the Upper East Side. I forget where the subway stops are, and trying to figure out, and then trying to get back here because I had a ton of work to do, and then trying to talk to you at the same time.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
That was great. I could hear the rustle and bustle of New York. People are going to just eat up this accent. Just so you know, Eugene, love it. I'm enjoying it already. I'm a huge fan. Tell the good people of the EBFC show lots about yourself.
Starting when?
It's a great question. Let's start. Let's start where you'd like to start. So the audience is mostly project managers.
Okay.
We also have some young people considering, should I go to construction? So you could be the voice that definitively says, yes, I heard it from Eugene. This is a good career. I should definitely do it. Hell no, I'm getting out of this thing.
I mean, what is it? What is there cooler than construction? I'm an architect, graduate from Cornell University. And I have been in New York for almost 25 years now, if not 25. And I have my own office that I have a partner with, or a small office, depending on the day and the remoteness of the remote working. There's 2, sometimes 5. Somebody during COVID was like, yeah, can I just work from Paris this summer? Yeah, I guess. And so we're a small office. We one of the main reasons for starting the office was that we wanted to do what we were kind of not allowed to do in other offices, both from the point of view of behavior, and sort of tackling different projects at different scales, and having the liberty of just like, you know what, that project looks interesting because of X, Y, and Z, and I want to do it. And so that's what we do. I come from a very, very varied background. I spent some time at Gensler in New York, which is a completely different monster than Gensler anywhere else in the country. I spent some time at an office called Eniad, which used to be called Polshek, which I can give you an entirely separate podcast on rebranding offices and what not to do and what things to do. A lot of great civic work out of the office, a lot of museums, a lot of college and university work. So that was very nice and enjoyable. And like we were talking before, I spent my sort of formative years in an office, which no longer exists, but it was a great education, and there's been a lot of offices that have come out of that office. You can probably, there's almost like 20 offices, all small, but and then I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I spent up to high school there before I came to college, and I did do some work down there in the summers and so on. We're big believers in a generalist practice. Almost every project that we have for the people that are interested in construction or kind of other fields related to that, the lines are completely blurred between the engineers, the architects, the PMs, most of the projects that we do are very, very collaborative. Not necessarily by design, sometimes by accident. Sometimes they're just kind of weird projects to begin with, and just kind of the lines are not that clear, which sucks for fee and kind of staffing planning and all of that, but they're very rewarding.
So you're in the right place. I mean, that's the audience here. We love vibration. And,
Yeah.
Sometimes in our business, we make money by accident. So that's okay too.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Or sometimes you don't, and just keep moving.
I've had architects on the show before talking about just completely, and I'm going to paraphrase, completely throwing away 6 months worth of work because a principal might have thought, no, it's not in line with what needs to come out of this office. So they go at a loss and redo all of that work. And I'm hearing from some friends in the business that's not as uncommon as I would think.
I mean, I have not personally experienced it like an inter-office thing, but I've experienced being hired by a client because they have money in a budget somewhere, and the architect's fee or the design team fees compared to the overall project is this little. And I've had clients that say, okay, thank you very much for the drawings. I'm just going to put them over here. And then, we'll figure out if we want to do it or not. And I'm like, guys, we just spent the last 6 months of our lives just pulling all-nighters every other week. And you're just going to, what? That's happened to me twice.
Ooh.
And one of those happened around the time immediately after my first kid was born. He was born on a Friday, and I was in the office Saturday, Sunday. Fortunately, the hospital was a couple blocks away from the office. It's not something cool to do, but it just gives you, once you go through that type of stuff a couple of times, you're like, guys, this is not, it's like, we don't need to be pulling all-nighters. We don't need to be working every weekend. There's no. And over here, we don't do that, or we try not to do it.
You've had a good variety of experiences under your belt, and your approach in your office is just different. So your practice now, you had your person working from Paris because of the Rona. So that's not, it's not a bad thing. It's very interesting, but a lot of companies didn't give that flexibility.
Well, but that's so one of the things that we actually had a new person start yesterday. And I remember when we were talking to him, we were like, look, we can't give you the kind of the nice 401k package that a big office can't give you, right? We can barely give you the health insurance that you need, but we can give you something, right? We can be somewhat competitive on the salary. I mean, I think the thing that we can offer is flexibility, not working with jerks. You'll hear me say that a couple of times. We don't like jerks.
Awesome.
And there's no need for jerks. There's no need to work with them, and there's no need for them to be around me, especially. So no. So, so what we like to, the handful of people that had worked with us are people that sort of already kind of have 1 foot in, 1 foot out in, they're all kind of gearing towards having their own practice. And we're like, look, that's something that's feedback that we can give you. We can give you flexibility, and you can have a hands-on kind of firsthand experience of what it is to run a small practice, and 2 have gone on their own to start their own gigs. So that's the kind of the thing that we can offer. We can't offer, we can't compete with a benefits package of a bigger office, but we're not jerks. We can be flexible, as long as you get your work done, I don't care.
I think the not being jerks, I mean, until you've had what I would consider the typical construction experience, you don't know how priceless it is not to have to work with jerks. And if you're, Eugene, if you're running a no jerks zone,
I think I need to put that on the reverse of the business card, no jerk zone.
Yeah.
No, and look, and if we've said no to some clients that were just jerks, it's like, I don't, either I'm going to make this R fee so high that they'll say no, or just we'll outright, we'll just say, look, I'm sorry, but we're too busy. It's just like, seriously, that's just, I have no time in my life for jerks.
Oh, I love that. You've made a fan out of me. So Eugene, tell the good people, where can they find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you? And I'll make sure we put those links in the show notes.
Well, I think it's through, we had a good Instagram page that we post regularly. So you can contact us through there or through the website, colbergarchitecture.com.
How do architects, specifically good architects in a no jerk zone, collaborate with clients and construction teams?
One kind of fortunate thing that I think we've had is that most of our clients are in about the same age range that I am and my partner is, right? I'm 45, she's 47 or 29, I forget.
I think you messed that up. You should have said,
I think,
first. Yeah.
And so I think that nowadays the kind of the people, the sort of the decision makers on the client side are our contemporaries. Some of them are younger, but the kind of the bulk of them are, close in age to us, and they're very relatable. I mean, you can always find something to relate to them in a personal level, like just, it's like whether it's the kids or, a lot of work, or during COVID, it was like, what were people doing? Like, who had tests? We didn't have tests, like, all this stuff. But it's once you establish that, and we're not very formal by any means. We're very relaxed and just not, if you want, somebody with a shirt and tie, just go somewhere else. So we like to keep it personal and sort of, again, no jerks. There's no, everybody's a big happy family. Everybody has the same goal here. All we want to do is cool projects. All the clients want to do are cool projects. Contractors, they want to do cool projects, right? So I think as long as you keep, I've always had the attitude that, we're sort of here to help, right? Everybody has the same common goal. So, and I think as long as you find those kind of shared moments, shared values, it gives you something to fall back on when there's disagreements. Because you can always remember, oh yeah, we might disagree on this, but 90% of all the other stuff we agree on. And there's a reason why we got here, right? And because they're not jerks, they can understand where, how you got there, or, like, for example, I was having a conversation, a call today with a client where it's this workplace project, and these HVAC units don't fit. They just don't fit. And I'm like, look, guys, that on the shop drawing, there was a dimension, you assume the mechanical contractor knows what he's doing. And they were like, well, the CM who's not being very helpful, but this conversation with the client I thought was just going to be just an hour of somebody just yelling at me like, why didn't you, this and that. And, and they were upset, but also understanding like, okay, how do we get here? How do we fix it? These people need to move to this new office. So it's like, how do we get over this in a smart way that causes the least amount of brain damage?
It's a beautiful approach. And then you said the collaboration you have with the clients, at what point are you engaging the construction team with that? Or is it coming back to you through the client side first in that particular example?
Well, so on our projects, we have a lot of repeat clients and we have a lot of repeat contractors. And we find that to be super, super helpful because on day one, you already know what that dynamic is. And you have sort of shared experiences already that you can kind of refer back to. And so depending on the size of the project, I mean, the bigger the project, the earlier the construction manager, in this case, the CM, gets engaged. But on smaller projects, most of the smaller projects that we do are for clients that we have a personal connection to. So whether they're friends or friends of clients, or it's somebody that you want, even though it's a small project, or it might be might be an apartment renovation that's not very interesting or something, but you're doing it not as a favor, but these people need help. You have a little bit of time. They're friends of a friend. Just go ahead and do it, right? So we would very often engage or just informally speak to one of the contractors that we use all the time to kind of get real feedback information on different things. I've always seen contractors as collaborators from day one. The issue is how, if they are engaged in that manner, how do they get compensated and by who, right?
Yeah.
So unless they're willing to do it for free, which sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah. I mean, everybody does it, right?
Yeah. There's certain things that it's not about the money. Yeah. It's a good point. I like that.
Exactly.
It's a good story. I think it's a good transition, touching the inside and the outside. And we talked about you getting on scaffolds earlier in your career. I've got a question here to follow up on that. When it comes to architecture, specifically interiors,
yeah,
like you've got some good experience with some historic touches to some modern stuff. You mentioned even some apartment stuff, if it's for the right client, for the right circumstances. But as far as like historic renovations or putting back to equal in kind,
yeah,
I've played with before. I've got a beautiful picture just off camera from a baby project that I had on 6 North Michigan Avenue, which I love. At the time, I didn't love it. Didn't love it at the time. But
right.
now, in hindsight, with memory,
yeah, exactly.
Fog. It was like one of the greatest projects ever.
Right.
And so, is there a difference when you're on a historic project, what clients are asking for, how they're talking to you, versus something modern where somebody wants something novel?
I think people, especially in New York, when you have a historic property, most of the people have a sense of stewardship about that structure. If they're the building owner, if you're working for a tenant, it might be a little different. But if you're working for the owner, there's like kind of an understanding that if you're the owner of a building and you're a regular kind of non-crazy person, there's this because there's
caveats.
There's crazy building owners that are like, yeah, whatever. But most people have like, when you own a historic building, you see it as an asset to your portfolio or whatever it is, as opposed to a negative, right? So you want to take care of it. You want to make sure that, partly because they have to do it by code. Yeah, the Landmarks Preservation Commission got started after Penn Station got demolished. It's very, very regulated. But look, some people like it. Some people see it as an asset to have properties like that. And then depending on the type of project, whether it's like an adaptive reuse or just even an interiors job, there's always kind of, trying to get some, like it's mostly an exercise of just kind of peeling back layers of bad renovations and just kind of getting it back to some of the original bones. But yeah, I mean, look, the fabric of New York is from the 19th century, right?
Right.
So you're always, at any point, you're bound to work in a historic building, whether it's landmarked or not. It's, it sort of takes the similar responsibility.
The non-crazy owners, disclaimer,
Yeah.
they want to put it back and kind of make it right.
Yeah.
Is there a difference, like when you don't have the constraint of the historic preservation group on the modern interiors? What are people looking for?
There, so for example, on townhouses, right, which is where you kind of see that the most. I think people are trying to either, well, it's not creating, it's sort of uncovering authenticity, right? And how do you do that and accomplish, in the case of a townhouse, for example, kind of a modern in a sense of contemporary, as opposed to just kind of stylistically modern, although those are our favorites. How do you take this container that has layers of history and has authenticity and so on, and make it into a sort of a place for modern living? And in those interactions can be, sort of on a detail basis, or how do you, or especially if you're trying to do, like, how do you take one of these old townhouses, for example, and turn into a passive house, right? And that's when you kind of start seeing the kind of different layers, and how do they occupy spaces, or how do they, interact with the exterior, which kind of make it super interesting.
Do you find that you get sparks of creativity when you're in the spaces, or when you've done some investigation and you're back maybe at the office, or maybe even just like getting ready for work in the morning? Where does the spark typically hit you or people on your team for what you're going to create in those spaces? Are you thinking inside out or outside in?
Our office is in downtown Brooklyn, right above the new Apollo Diner, right above the kitchen. Depending on the time of day, it smells like French fries.
Oh
Which
my
is,
God, that would destroy.
yeah, you'd be 700 pounds. But so I, ever since a long time ago, I ride my bike to work. And, the ride from our apartment over here is about 20 minutes. And I go to job sites on the bike, and I go to meetings on the bike, and that's usually the only time I get to think. I should be paying attention to the road. But somehow I can do both.
I kind of feel like I missed out not talking to you while you're on the bike. You were walking.
You should. There are certain people, and I have certain phone calls early in the morning or late at night that I totally just take on the bike. We have a weekly call with our publicist, Deborah. That one I take on the bike all the time. And sometimes she's like, oh, I can't hear you. I'm like, oh yeah, hold on, let me slow down, because you get the wind on the headphones. But yeah, so I mean, so that's when I think wherever you can get time and space to think is usually when things like that happen. And it's not necessarily a spark, it's just that you have the right space, or the right amount of space and time to just kind of put all of these disparate thoughts together. Because in front of the computer, there's always, I have 2 screens, everybody's got 2 screens, but there's always like the email or the notification or the work or the calendar and the thing that you're late to. And it's all, now with the camera with Zoom. So there's really not enough time to kind of just like put the blinders and do it. So for me, that happens in the bike. That being said, though, going to job sites ever since I was young, I think that's a life-changing experience. whether it's during construction or after, or close to completion. That's always like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. There's a reason we did it like that. Or like, oh crap, thank God nobody's going to notice that, but I'll remember that for the next time. No, it's always, I think for I've always had, not necessarily that I've had a hard time, but sometimes it's hard to mentally get into the space in a drawing. But it's like that. It's instantaneous when you go to the site.
Oh, sounds like it is. And then you just have the idea, and then when you get to where you get to, you can remember it, recall it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Get it down on paper.
Yeah.
Gauge. I love it. I never would have expected by expiration that you've got going on. I'm making that up as a new word, Eugene, just in case you're wondering.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a quote from the mayor of Rome, Italy, from a couple of years ago. The old mayor, not the new mayor, who used to bike to work too, that cycling is the right combination of fatigue and I think it was fatigue and liberty or something like that, right? Like you're just tired enough, but it also is just, you're free enough to kind of, you have time to just kind of go through things. So that's what I do on my way back from the worst thing though is going back home. You get time to think about all the crap that you're like, oh shit, I meant to send that email, or or like, oh man, I forgot to schedule that meeting. It's just, I have 20 minutes to think about all the crap I didn't have time to do.
That's the curse part.
Yeah, I know. Right. Exactly. That's the, on the way. So it's that we're down the hill. So on the way down the hill, I think about all the positive things that I'm going to do. And then on the way back up the hill, you're like, oh crap, I didn't get to do that.
You're uphill and you're mentally going uphill.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Speaking of uphill, so you've survived a pandemic. Congratulations on.
Yes. Same to you. We're
And you're back in the office. I want to hear from your perspective, from your practice, your vantage point about the new Apollo, not the old, but the new Apollo kitchen.
Yeah, God knows about the old one. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
How is it? I'm sure COVID's impacted them, but how has it impacted your practice?
Yeah. Well, it's it didn't impact our practice that much. It didn't change. It didn't. And I say that carefully because to some degree it did, to some degree it didn't. But since we're small to begin with, and we don't necessarily have the infrastructure of a 20, 30, 100-person firm, there wasn't that much to manage to begin with. And because we were so flexible, just kind of part of our DNA, like when that person was like, look, I'm gonna be in Paris this summer with my parents. She kind of wasn't asking either. She was She was like, I'm doing this, by the way. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Well, for people watching the show, I mean, you see exactly, Eugene has nailed this impersonation of this young professional. Now, for those of you listening in, it's worth coming back and remembering where this is happening. So you could see his pause, his face clearly said, I'm just telling you so you know, but I will work tomorrow.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, and no, the issue was that she this person lived in Manhattan and she had been working remotely. And at some point I'm like, look, I haven't seen you for 2 months. I guess it doesn't really matter where you're working from. Yeah, okay, so Europe is 5-6 hours away. So just get your work done. And then if you have a question, we'll overlap in the morning, and it is what it is. Like, but again, I think that's our view of the universe anyways. Like, as long as you get your work done, it's cool. And, it's that sort of hierarchical pressure is not there. What it did to our process and the way that we work, I think that's what was most impactful, because you probably know, I mean, everybody listening probably knows, it's like having a Zoom meeting, just exhausting.
Oh my God.
And it turned from, I mean, it sort of hit different projects differently, right? Like projects that were already doing construction, construction stopped in New York, like done. You couldn't build anything. So it became, we were working on a 60 unit apartment building, and you're like, we have to finish, like there's no, so we had to work with the client and the developer and the CM to figure out ways. The city had a couple of exceptions that you could do to kind of keep working as sort of emergency work. So it became this kind of big exercise in how do we get the things that we need to get done under these kind of emergency permits. But projects that were very early in design, the present, and our clients will tell you too, on other projects that they're working on, the presentations or the design discussions become almost like, you're checking the box on something else. It's like people ask you for the PDF the night before so they can look at it. So there's no real discussion. They're just listening to you while checking their email, doing something else. And then they just kind of send you comments when they're, afterwards. I'm like, well, there's kind of no discussion, which kind of used to happen in a conference room or in a side office. So that's been a little hard. It's also looking at something. I mean, I have a big screen, but if most of these people are on laptops, and looking at presentations and looking at drawings on laptops just kind of doesn't work. Looking at materials, like there's no, it's just the materiality gets lost, right? So we've sort of had to work overtime to make sure that people understand the ideas that we're putting together. Because the other thing that we found too was that people would just kind of nod and nod and nod and nod. And then you would say, hey, anybody has any questions? And they're like, yeah, no, okay, great, let's keep moving it. And then like 6 months later, they're like, the hell is this? We never saw this. And I'm like, well, we showed it to you on, and they're like, well, so there's been a lot of that sort of people hiding behind, kind of not taking responsibility for decisions, or maybe being afraid to ask. One of the things that we've noticed too is that the meetings, like a lot more people are in meetings. Similar to when you send an email and you copy like 30 people. It's just like, well, there's no need to do that. But on the Zooms, you'll have somebody who's kind of peripherally involved in the project, and they're just kind of listening to the meeting while kind of doing something else. Or, it's like, you never know who's sort of paying attention, who's not paying attention. But yeah, so that I think that's the most impactful. Otherwise, I mean, we've been able to work, we've been able to keep working. We're a small office. We're not in a big building. So all of the kind of the security measures and stuff like that are not there. We share the office with two kind of small businesses, and we just, sent an email to each other. It's like, okay, well, let's come up with some rules. I'll be over here, you'll be over there. We'll wash our hands. We'll wear masks, we'll open the windows, and, so that pressure wasn't there. So in terms of sort of production of work, we didn't see a kind of reduction of that.
Yeah, what I like about that story is how you had communication of something we talked about at the beginning, and you just reached out and kept it human. I think it goes back to your philosophy of the no jerks, which you promised to say a bunch of times. Just by the way, I'm counting it over here. You got room. You got runway for more of that.
Yeah, no jerks. Yeah.
No jerks, people. And keeping it human. Yeah, some people in very large, complex organizations, like the rules that people had to go through during the pandemic were changing fast and went from super extreme strict to nothing at all. There were areas, I heard some states, I talked to people as I've traveled around the country, where like the pandemic never showed up where they live.
Yeah, no, and for example, for here, I mean, we have old colleagues and friends that are architects and engineers and work in construction, that work in large offices, and to some people, the separation between I mean, and this is nothing that this is not news, right? But the working from home scenario where you would just like, okay, well, I'm just going to have dinner and then just go back to my desk and keep working. Just because there was this, because I mean, at least after the initial shock of COVID, where just kind of the world froze, the workload, at least in New York for architects, just kept increasing. And like everybody else, there was, I mean, people have a hard time finding help. Some people moved out, some people kind of had second thoughts and about their careers and kind of life choices and stuff. But yeah, the amount of work we have now is just, it's out of control.
With all that change happening, we hear about change all the time from a design professional's perspective, from your perspective.
Yeah.
Disclaimer, this is Eugene's perspective.
Yeah, there you go.
I got your name.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've been practicing it in my mind quietly. So yeah, Eugene, I like it. Now I feel like we're getting closer. What's something that design professionals would be good, like especially for younger professionals just getting into the business now, and they're coming into this change and they're just going to show up like you did so many years ago and think this is just how it is? What's something that you tell them it'd be good for them to know entering this environment now?
Construction and architecture and design and even engineering all goes back, and I think you mentioned it a little while ago, it all relates back spatially and I mean, we build for people, right? And we build spaces for people, and we build at the scale of people. We build, if you're a mechanical engineer, you build for that, for the comfort of people. If you're a structural engineer, you build for the safety of people. So to remember that you are designing for people, you should always have the sort of the greater good in mind. And like you said, just try and keep it as personal as you can, right? I think and one of the things that they used to sort of beat into our heads when I worked at Gensler was that, when you work on a project, you always need to see it from your client's perspective all the time. You have to figure out before they do what they're thinking, what their reactions are going to be, what's important to them. So at least you understand your audience, or where are they coming from, in order for you to have an intelligent and thoughtful idea or response to their request or whatever. So I would say to anybody who's new in the field or who's thinking about doing construction, is that at the end of the day, it's about people, right? It's the scale that you're working for, it's the people that you're serving. It is a service profession, all of what we do, whether you're laying brick, designing a duct, or working on a new Revit model. It's a service industry, and you get to serve the people. So the more personal it can be, the better.
No, I love that. It's definitely in tune with the heart of our show, which is respect for people and being so people focused. Hey, Eugene, thank you so much for coming on to.
Well, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing a perspective that we don't often get to do, and pausing like we do now and just having this conversation mano a mano.
Yeah.
It's nice. It feels good. I feel like I'm catching up with an old friend.
Yeah. I mean, but that's, what, that's actually what we strive for with our clients, right? I mean, granted, we're starting from the position of no jerks. But at the end of the day, I mean, I want you to be happy. Like if you're my client, there's nothing more than I want for you to be happy. Most of our clients are repeat clients. So, and they become just kind of part of this bigger network of just kind of friendly colleagues and clients, which is great. And the same with contractors and the same with consultants. And
It takes a village to build.
yeah, exactly. Especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The complexity going up so much and the changes happening so fast. We need those people.
Yeah.
Like, I think you're right. I didn't even think about this. Let me just go back a second. When when the pandemic hit, we went from having, no calls, almost practically zero Zoom calls in construction, and everything had to be face to face.
I mean, we had some like go-to meetings and some WebEx and stuff.
Super rare.
For projects that were, like we were doing a couple projects in China, and we always had those. But yeah,
To 100%.
yeah, exactly.
Like, I remember in the early days of the pandemic, I think the first meeting I had, it was like the week everything shut down. I think the first Zoom thing we did was like 12 hours long. One continuous Zoom call. It was something that was supposed to be in person, around a conference room table, a working session.
Yeah.
We had to make it work around our computers, which were
exactly.
It was totally different for people, and cameras on, which people are not used to. I'm seeing cameras off again already.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, people are kind of tired of the camera.
Yeah. I was so glad to see your camera on this one. So
yeah.
That was good. Could have been like a VR augmented reality if you were on the bike doing this show, racing up that hill on your way home. I want to give you the last downhill glide on the show.
There you go.
Take us out on some good, easier, better for construction. The future is bright. Share some of your positivity and optimism with our fans.
I think the future is no jerks. There's no reason to be one. There's no reason to be one. Everybody's in the same team. Everybody's in the same team. Like you said, it takes a village. And I think one thing that we've been seeing though over the last, 20, 25 years is the lines between the different design professionals and the different, I don't know what they're called, but construction professionals, let's say, and clients being blurred, right? You have architects that work for the client. You have contractors that are, consultants. You have consultants that work on the construction side. You have, it's just like everything is just a big mush. The benefit of that is that people can see each other's point of view, hopefully easier. And when you're working with no jerks, that's even easier.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.